Hello, dear beaders. This is Ann Benson of Beads East. I want to thank you all for the many requests you've made for a video on the dreaded invisible join for tubular bead crochet. Here it is, in all its maddening misery. I'm kidding, of course. Once you grasp the mechanics behind it, you'll have no difficulty with the invisible join. I must warn you, however, that this technique bears one similarity to basic tubular bead crochet. There is no room for experimentation. Once again, you must obey. I know this rubs some of you wrong, just as it did me when I learned. But as my sainted mother used to say, it will just come out better if you do what I tell you to do. You can use the technique I'll demonstrate here to join a simple tube, a tube that has multiple sizes of beads, or a shaped tube like our Beads East triangle bangle. The progression of the steps is identical. There's one really important requirement for your tube before you can make an invisible join. If you're not working in all one color, your tube must consist of complete repeats of your pattern. Otherwise, you'll have a glaring inconsistency in your finished piece. We're demonstrating with a 3-1 pattern, which, when crocheted 6 around, yields a diagonally dotted tube. Another fairly important factor in your success is the tension on your initial chain of beads. Keep it even and slightly loose. The length of each stitch should approximate the length of the bead it holds. If the chain is too tight, it will be difficult to get the needle into the loops. Now, before we actually get started, let's take a quick look at the anatomy of the crocheted tube. As we discussed in our video on mastering tubular bead crochet, the whole idea is to get the beads on the outside and the fiber on the inside. There's an open channel in the middle of your tube all the way through. At the starting end, it's not always easy to see, but it's there, trust me. Notice how the beads of your starting end are positioned like donuts, flat, stacked up on each other. The beads of the ending end, however, stand up straight, like tires, and the channel at the end of the tube is distinctly visible. The first step in the invisible join is to prepare the tube for finishing. You won't need the thread of the starting end, so put a needle on that tail and run it back into the tube. Don't pull too tightly. You want to avoid distorting the position of the beads of the first round. Weave the tail in and out of the tube, but don't run it through the holes of any beads. That's something you will rarely, if ever, do. Now, if you've used one of our kits for a roll-on bangle with end caps and a focal bead, you may recall that we recommend 1 round of unbeaded crochet at the ending end of your tube. For the invisible join, you should not make this unbeaded round. Having the beads in the upright tire position is critical to the success of the join, and adding that unbeaded round will turn them into donuts. Cut your ending thread tail to about 12 inches. Run the cut end through the last crochet loop to tighten and secure the end. Now you're ready to start. Let's identify the 2 most important bead players. On the starting end, identify the first bead you crocheted. On the ending end, identify the last bead you crocheted into. Not the last bead you crocheted, but the bead of the last stitch you crocheted into as part of your tube. This is also the last flat bead in the donut position in your tube before the upright beads of the top round. Weave your thread into the tube, then reverse direction and bring the thread out of the last bead you crocheted into. This is the one and only time I'll tell you to run a thread through a bead hole when finishing a crochet project, lending credence to the theory that for every rule there is an exception. Hereafter, you're running the needle through thread loops only, not through the threads themselves. Avoid piercing the thread with the tip of your needle, as it will create a distortion in the pattern. Now that your needled thread is emerging from the correct bead on the ending end, you need a quick lesson on how to hold all the various parts for a seamless join. Some people call this the cigarette hold. In your non-dominant hand, hold the ending end of the tube between your index and middle fingers, and the starting end between your ring finger and your thumb. Run the needle from right to left through the top of the loop that holds the very first bead you crocheted. Tighten the thread to draw the two ends together. As you progress around the tube, you'll tighten the thread after each thread pass. We'll show it untightened so you can see the overall thread path. Now run the needle through the thread loop of the left side of the tire positioned bead, just to the left of the last bead you crocheted into. As you tighten the thread, note how the bead moves into the donut position. Next, run the thread through the top of the loop that holds the second